Yeah, I don't make resolutions, really. I think I make them along as the year go by, but I don't think I have any big nostalgia about January 1st.
When the legend Clint Eastwood decided to break his silence about the man standing over 2 meters tall who had once commanded his deference, all of Hollywood was stunned to realize they had missed the most shocking truths.
You're the Gray Rider. You would not make peace with the Bluecoats. You may go in peace.
I reckon not.
Behind the colossal shadow of the native cowboy, who once shook the Academy Awards, and the mysterious midnight cleansing ritual, lay a brutal life-and-death battle concealed for decades. What drained the vitality of this 120-kilogram man of steel, and what hidden shadows behind the glamour drove an icon like Eastwood to speak out? In 1976, following the phenomenal resonance of his Oscar-winning work, Will Sampson did not drift along the wave of mediocre commercialization. He chose scripts with cultural depth, beginning with the classic project, The Outlaw Josey Wales. Director and superstar Clint Eastwood was then searching for a presence commanding enough authority to play Comanche Chief Ten Bears. Sampson's arrival on the Warner Brothers set immediately convinced the entire film crew. Eastwood later openly recounted that Sampson's stature of over 2 meters and his stoic demeanor exuded a natural regal quality. The veteran actor affirmed that his co-star's unwavering gaze always carried the weight of cold steel. The negotiation confrontation sequence between Josey Wales and Ten Bears quickly became a defining legacy of 1970s Western cinema. Two icons representing two distinct cultures stood face to face without the need for roaring gunfire. At the climactic moment of negotiating the historic peace treaty, the character Ten Bears looked straight at Josey Wales and delivered the immortal proclamation, "There is iron in the words of death, and there is iron in the words of life." The resounding success of Eastwood's masterpiece firmly cemented Will Sampson's reputation, but at the same time positioned him as a cultural guardian. In 1977, he agreed to join the Western horror project The White Buffalo alongside star Charles Bronson. On the Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer set, Sampson witnessed a bitter reality as the production executives cast numerous white actors and applied skin coloring to masquerade as indigenous people. This was an abusive precedent that had persisted for decades in Hollywood. Refusing to compromise with this affront to his ancestry, Sampson took unprecedented action by declaring a unilateral strike. He resolutely walked off the set for 24 hours, bringing the entire production line to a standstill. Sampson's unyielding stance dealt a severe blow to the archaic filmmaking mindset of the studio heads at the time. Producer Dino De Laurentiis was ultimately forced to concede, agreeing to negotiate and reform the casting standards for indigenous actors. Recalling this intense confrontation to the press, Sampson forthrightly expressed his view, "We do not need the film industry's pity. We only demand the truth and basic dignity for our people." The strike was not only a personal victory, but also spurred Sampson to build a lasting legal protective mechanism. He realized that young indigenous talents could hardly find opportunities without an official networking registry. By 1983, Will Sampson and his trusted collaborator Zoe Escobar officially founded the American Indian Registry for the Performing Arts. This was the first professional registry for indigenous performers in the history of the American film industry. The organization began publishing annual directories archiving the profiles of hundreds of indigenous actors, singers, musicians, and technicians. This eliminated the familiar excuse used by Hollywood directors that they could not find qualified indigenous personnel. Having dedicated his youth to standing on the front lines to defend his community's voice when the studio lights faded, Sampson was left alone to confront family tragedies, physical collapse, and bizarre supernatural occurrences on one of Hollywood's most notorious horror film sets. The Secret of Poltergeist 2. Nose. Entering the period starting from 1983, Will Sampson's personal life bore the weight of many profound fluctuations. Following consecutive marital breakdowns, he single-handedly shouldered the responsibility of providing for his extended family and raising his children under immense pressure. Bearing heavy economic pressures, he still perseveringly passed on the flame of preserving ancestral roots to the younger generation. His son, Timothy Sampson, followed in his father's footsteps on the theatrical stage, while Lumhi and Samsochi Sampson became internationally renowned traditional hoop dancers. In 1985, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer began searching for key personnel for the blockbuster horror project Poltergeist The Other Side. Thanks to his established reputation, Sampson was entrusted with the role of Taylor, a native shaman confronting evil forces. This was one of the rare roles on the screen of the 1980s where the native character was not distorted into a savage villain. Sampson's character represented spiritual light wisdom and the courage to rescue the victims. Right after that, the filming process quickly plunged into a tense atmosphere when the crew discovered that the production board had used real human skeletons as props. This information immediately fueled extreme panic throughout the entire technical crew. Actress Jo Beth Williams, alongside many colleagues, publicly expressed outrage and unease over this bizarre decision. The invisible fear created heavy psychological pressure, threatening to stall the film's shooting schedule for weeks on end. Faced with the deadlock, Will Sampson demonstrated the qualities of someone deeply knowledgeable about traditional tribal rituals. After the film crew departed at midnight, he remained alone on the quiet set to conduct a cleansing ceremony using sage smoke. Explaining the decision to perform the special midnight spiritual ritual to soothe his colleagues' psychological state. Sampson once shared, "The ritual is not to show off power, but a prayer to bring peace to the departed souls and the living." The next morning, peace returned to the set, helping the entire film crew release psychological pressure to continue their work. Sampson's sense of responsibility and calmness cemented absolute trust and respect from Hollywood filmmakers. At that time, the sequence of tragic events that followed was distorted by sensationalist press into the so-called poltergeist curse. Actor Julian Beck passed away from stomach cancer in September 1985, right before the film could complete its post-production phase. The tabloid media of that time immediately fabricated a series of baseless, ghostly stories surrounding Beck's death and the incidents on set. They deliberately tagged spiritual bad luck onto any artist participating in MGM's project. Director Brian Gibson later spoke out to dismiss all supernatural conspiracy theories targeting the actor's physical exhaustion. The stories about the curse are just cheap sensationalism from the tabloid media, while Will had to fight extraordinarily against critical illness. Enduring persistent aches and worsening respiratory decline, Sampson still brilliantly completed every scene, demanding high physicality. In the end, rumors of black magic or curses were merely a curtain veering over a manifold more brutal medical tragedy. A silent life-and-death battle was quietly draining the vitality of the 2-meter giant. The historic surgery. In late 1986, Will Sampson's health suddenly deteriorated severely. Leading medical experts in the United States diagnosed him with a sinister disease called systemic scleroderma. This is an extremely dangerous degenerative autoimmune syndrome causing the immune system to turn on itself and attack connective tissues throughout the body. The disease hardens blood vessels, destroys skin structure, and severely ravages internal organs. Critical complications quickly spread, directly attacking the actor's cardiovascular system and lungs. His ability to absorb nutrients was completely halted, leading to unprecedented malnutrition and physical exhaustion. Sampson's muscular physique, weighing up to 122 kilograms at his peak, dropped catastrophically to less than 68 kilograms. The renowned giant of American cinema was now reduced to an emaciated figure on a hospital bed. Faced with this hanging-by-a-thread situation, Houston Methodist Hospital in Texas decided to accept his case. Doctors prescribed an ultimate medical recourse, performing major surgery to simultaneously transplant both heart and lungs in mid-1987. This was one of the most complex and risky organ transplant operations in the medical history of that time. The major surgery lasted continuously for many hours under the direction of leading American surgical specialists. In terms of surgical technique, the doctors successfully performed the transplantation of the two vital organs into the patient's body. This news initially ignited a fragile glimmer of hope for his family, friends, and legions of admiring fans. Regrettably, because Sampson's physical condition had been so severely depleted, after months of battling the illness, his body was unable to adapt to the fierce post-operative complications. The severely weakened immune system heightened the risk of organ rejection. In the intensive care unit, he had to simultaneously confront acute kidney failure and an attack from a systemic fungal infection. Every cutting-edge medical intervention available at the time gradually reached a dead end. Before entering his final life and death moments, Sampson still maintained the stoic dignity of a Muskogee warrior. He looked at his loved ones keeping vigil by the bedside and told them, "Do not cry for me, for the spirit of the Muskogee is always free and belongs to the wild Mother Earth." On June 3, 1987, Will Sampson officially drew his last breath at the hospital at the age of 53. His passing left profound grief across the film industry and the entire indigenous community. The actor's body was returned by his family for a solemn burial at Graves Creek Cemetery in the town of Hitchita, Oklahoma. He rests eternally in the heart of Mother Earth, where he first cried upon entering the world and nurtured his artistic soul. Hearing news of his close co-star's passing, Clint Eastwood, alongside many Hollywood luminaries, publicly expressed boundless sorrow. The film community united in honoring Sampson as an emblem of resilience and ethnic self-respect. Commemorating his talented colleague in an emotional statement to the media, Eastwood affirmed, "Will Sampson was a pure soul, a man of extraordinary pride and authentic integrity that Hollywood will never find a second time." Closing a brief but glorious life, the proud warrior's spirit finally returned to rest in the heart of Oklahoma's Mother Earth. Even so, to understand the roots of that extraordinary dignity that made all of Hollywood bow in reverence, the wheels of time must roll back to the starting point. That was where the Legends medal began to be forged, amid the fierce red dust of rodeo arenas and the quiet oil brush strokes bearing the name Sonny Sampson. Scars of the Rodeo Arena. On September 27, 1933, Will Sampson was born in a remote rural area of Okmulgee County, Oklahoma. The boy was of 100% Muskogee Creek Nation descent and was affectionately called Sonny by his family. Growing up in the midst of the Great Depression and intense racial discrimination, Sampson's childhood was a long series of days bound to deprivation. Traditional Muskogee culture, alongside ancestral memories early on, shaped his primal worldview. As he entered his teenage years in the late 1940s, Sampson demonstrated an imposing physique and extraordinary resilience. He decided to leave his hometown to embark on a professional rodeo competition path, beginning more than 20 years of life-and-death struggle on the backs of wild horses. Throughout 2 decades, from the 1950s to the early 1970s, he wandered across the western and southern states of America. Sampson competed in the perilous bareback bronc riding events, directly confronting the fragile line between life and death. Every time he was thrown from horseback was a gamble with his life, leaving dozens of severe injuries across his body. Later medical records noted that Sampson had suffered fractured ribs, internal organ damage, and lingering spinal injuries lasting for years. A transient life without a permanent home, alongside persistent physical agony, drove him into dark corners. The habit of relying on hard liquor to soothe physical wounds gradually formed, becoming a haunting shadow over the fighter's life. In the heart of American society prior to the 1970s, indigenous individuals like Sampson constantly endured isolation and harsh prejudice. Financial precariousness frequently plunged him into debt, forcing him to move continually from county to county just to make ends meet. Nonetheless, behind the rugged exterior and dusty scars of a rodeo competitor lay a profound artistic soul. Sampson began turning to painting as a sacred medium to unburden his inner thoughts and preserve his tribal ancestral identity. Using oil and watercolor mediums, he authentically depicted spiritual life-sacred dances and the majestic pride of horses. Sampson's paintings were uncompromised by commercialism, deeply steeped in a profound realist style with the mystical light of the wilderness. Although widely recognized within the rodeo circuit, Sampson always maintained that his paintbrush was where his true soul resided. In response to an art collector in Oklahoma, he once stated, "First and foremost, I am an artist. Painting is my breath and my true essence." By the early 1970s, his works began garnering attention from prestigious native art galleries. His paintings were exhibited at the Creek Cultural Heritage Center and the Philbrook Museum of Art, affirming the talent of a self-taught painter. Although his artwork was highly regarded by professionals, the meager income from selling paintings on the go was still insufficient to lift him out of poverty. At 41 years old, Sampson lived secluded on ranches, considering himself a wanderer on the margins of his times. Bearing a body covered in injuries after 2 decades of wrestling unruly broncs, Will Sampson had never intended to set foot in the cinema capital. But destiny orchestrated a chance encounter, transforming a penniless cowboy into a screen phenomenon alongside the brightest star of the era. A fateful touch of destiny. In mid-1974, the cinematic adaptation project of the literary masterpiece One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by producers Michael Douglas and Saul Zaentz entered an intense pre-production phase. The crew faced a casting challenge that seemed almost impossible. According to the original novel, the character Chief Bromden demanded an indigenous actor with a colossal physique, standing over 2 meters tall, while simultaneously possessing deeply expressive eyes. Director Miloš Forman scoured indigenous communities across the United States for 6 months without finding a suitable candidate. The deadlock dragged on until veteran rodeo announcer Mel Lambert accidentally mentioned Will Sampson during a discussion with the producers. With close ties established across Western competitions, Lambert affirmed that Sampson was the most perfect embodiment of the character. Receiving an invitation to an audition in the state of Oregon, Sampson arrived with skepticism toward the cinema capital. Instead of rehearsing the acting script, he brought along a portfolio of paintings depicting indigenous cultural life to prepare for the meeting. Stepping into the casting room of the cinema moguls, Sampson had prepared a practical backup plan. If I fail the audition, at least I can sell a few paintings to those rich Hollywood folks. That proud innocence brought a great surprise to the entire board of directors. Not only stunned by the towering stature and serene aura of the former rodeo competitor director Miloš Forman, and Michael Douglas immediately awarded him the major role. Concurrently, the entire production crew paid out to purchase every single painting Sampson had brought right on the spot. In early 1975, official filming took place inside the Oregon State Hospital campus in the city of Salem. Completely lacking professional acting experience, Will Sampson quickly proved his extraordinary artistic instinct before the cinema lenses of the renowned filmmakers. Sampson transformed character Bromden's silence into a powerful, deeply resonant cinematic language. His ability to express inner turmoil solely through his eyes and body gestures created a brilliant contrast alongside veteran star Jack Nicholson. The sequence where McMurphy shares a stick of juicy fruit gum with Chief Bromden was regarded by critics as the peak emotional turning point of the work. Bromden's relieved smile and first words of gratitude after years of pretending to be deaf and mute moved millions of viewers across the globe. The peak of Sampson's acting artistry erupted in the film's tragic and magnificent finale. The image of the character tightly gripping the hydrotherapy control console, weighing hundreds of pounds, lifting it off the concrete floor, and hurling it through the iron window frame to escape toward freedom became an immortal classic icon. Following its release in November 1975, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest instantly created a historic tremor at the global box office. The work reaped a massive gross of over $160 million, surpassing all initial predictions of the American media. At the 48th Academy Awards ceremony held in early 1976, the film entered history by sweeping the entire Big Five group of most prestigious awards. The work achieved major victories in the categories of Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Actress, and Best Adapted Screenplay. The resounding success of the film created a major media sensation, elevating Will Sampson from an unknown cowboy into the most sought-after indigenous star in America. Which of Will Sampson's roles impressed you the most? And what do you think about the special friendship between him and Clint Eastwood? Please leave your thoughts and perspectives right below in the comments section so we can discuss together. If you find this video valuable, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you do not miss subsequent classic cinema behind-the-scenes stories. Goodbye, and see you all in upcoming documentary features.